everyone. This is Stephanie Burns, founder of the Business of My Art. We're continuing our Soul Shifter series. And for this series, we have Rosemary Reyes, the founder of Pussy Pop. Welcome, Rosemary.
Hi, Stephanie. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming. I'm grateful that you're here. So we're just going to dive right in because I know there's people watching that want to know, what is Pussy Pop?
So I was living in New Orleans. I'm originally from New York, and I was living in New Orleans a couple of years ago. And when I first arrived, I noticed that there weren't many spaces that I knew of visibly to express myself and enjoy myself and feel safe and openly queer as a woman of color.
Right.
And so I was at, how did the name come up? I was at a bachelorette party, and I was the only queer person there. And a lot of the games and the conversations during the bachelorette party were centered around the phallus and the male anatomy. And I was kind of put off by that and like, okay, so I guess we're, pinning the dick on the male. And there was one section of the party where we were making crafts, and we were like kind of drawing and decorating visors.
Okay.
And I was just really frustrated at just this obsession around the male figure that I couldn't relate to as a queer woman.
Right.
In fact, that's something that I kind of pushed away my entire life.
Right.
And the words just pussy pop came up in my head, like if you're feeling ashamed, if you're feeling like you're not welcome in a certain space, flaunt it, flaunt who you are, flaunt what you got. And that's kind of came from was pop your pussy. Like if you're feeling like you don't belong there, the best you could do is make yourself feel comfortable and confident in that space and own the space you're taking up. Because often as queer people of color really are erased from public spaces.
Right.
And so that's why I wanted to start creating intentional, safe spaces is a very overused word now.
Right.
But literally a space where you could go flirt, meet people, find a prospective lover, and feel completely like you're in a space where you won't be threatened and like you're going to be celebrated for your identity as opposed to attacked for it. And
so let's go back, because you mentioned something, Pussy Pop, people are often shamed to, regardless, straight, queer, or otherwise, in terms of using that word pussy. And so you're saying, let's embrace it.
Yeah.
And then let's flaunt it. To not be ashamed. Right. And so your organization, your company, or your platform, and when you say create safe space, you're right, it is a word that's often overused, but in this particular instance, we're talking about creating a safe space for queer women of color. And so it's a nightlife. Is that true? Or is it more a day? Or kind of tell me what happens at these events.
So the other part of the pop part is that they would be pop-ups. So there isn't it kind of a fixed time, it's not a monthly party necessarily. But every time it's a different iteration. So the first one was a garden party in kind of in a space in New Orleans that was this overgrown old auto shop. Okay. And so that was really actually fun. And then the next one has started to be more nightlife oriented. Okay. We do them on Sundays as opposed to Saturdays. Things like that. The one my first one in New York that we did in January of this year was a daytime party as well. Okay. At just a small bar with an outdoor space, and it was really successful. The next one we're planning will be like on a Thursday evening after work. So definitely just different iterations, and I think people like that. I think the Saturday night party has its own set of challenges from an organizer's perspective. Right. Especially in creating a safer environment. Late night alcohol fueled confrontations. Right. Element to those spaces of aggression. Right. And so I think I felt safest starting with more tame daytime parties before I got kind of a handle on what the challenges were in nightlife spaces. and we're kind of looking into new models of security. You know, often security and bouncers can also be aggressive present, you know, a very aggressive presence. So we're trying to look into ways that we could have like volunteers that are sober in these spaces, the vibe check and intervene or start, you know, conversations that de-escalate any potential drama. So we're kind of trying to find new ways of safety, of creating a safety model in general.
And for someone who may be interested that's watching this interview to volunteer as that vibe checker, what would you say, what kind of background would they need to have? Or what do you think the ideal person would be for that role?
You know, there's no ideal person. I think if you care about your community, and maybe you're somebody that's very, maybe an empath, you know, that you could really feel out situations, you could feel out where the vibe doesn't feel too right, or you see somebody that might need support, you can go over and give them a glass of water and see how they're doing, and so that, you know, if they drank too much or aren't feeling well, or you know, saw an ex, whatever it is, somebody that's comforting. I think that's another element of nightlife where it can be, especially in New York City, you know, it can be really hard if you go alone when you're out, and if, you know, you're new to a community and you want to get to know other people, or there isn't often, it's kind of like you're out there and you're on your own, you know. If you have a bad night and your girlfriend that came with you got also too drunk, you can't really rely on her. So it's nice to have that built into a space intentionally.
Yeah, I think that's great. So what's the age group for people when you have your different events? Is there a particular age group that you are targeting?
I mean, honestly, you know, I would love for it to be from 18 to 75. You know, but I think naturally, it definitely is, I would say, mid-20s to early 30s, or early to mid-20s, early 30s.
Okay.
It's a very young crowd. And as I'm getting older and continuing to organize, I'm noticing that the people that are coming to my spaces are younger. So I'm like, oh, okay, so I need to like be up on what the new thing is, and have my you know, my hand on the pulse a little more. So anyone can attend. It's just what you've seen is they're usually in their 20s. That have attended previous events, but anyone's welcome. So if you're watching and you're older and you want to check it out, well, so how would people know? Obviously, it's a pop-up. So how would people know, like, if they're interested, when the next pop-up is? Is there a Facebook page or a mailing list? Yeah, so we do have a Facebook page. It's just I think the hashtag for that is, or it's at Pussay, Pussay, pop, at facebook.com kind of thing. And so we'll usually announce it on Facebook 2 weeks before, around then, before an event. And I will also do flyers. So if I see, you know, a cutie on a train that I think would enjoy the space, I'll give them a flyer and be like, hey, this is happening. Would love to see you there. Because I think I'm not too media savvy, social media savvy, and computer savvy. And I also think that there's something that's really powerful about it. Obviously, it brings people together, but it's the way a lot of the person to person, how special that is. So I would love for one day for it to be just completely not online.
Oh, awesome.
And for people to just, especially again, you know, we had a hard time promoting the last party because it was right after the Women's March. And the word pussy had come under attack. You know, for a lot of valid reasons, I think people think pussy, especially in the queer community, and it feels in some spaces transphobic because it feels like it's just about the female anatomy, when it's really not. Pussy is whatever you want it to be. And so we were, I think, blocked from doing Facebook boosts because we didn't meet ethical standards on Facebook.
Oh, wow.
So a lot of those challenges made me realize that online is not something that I can continue to rely on completely, because there are restrictions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So ideally, it'll eventually become like this whole underground pop up where, and you know, I miss those days where those underground parties, like you just had to know, you just had to be in the know or be in the right place. And of course, word gets out and you attend, but no one knew, you know, on the surface, no one could like check in, like, oh, there is this thing going on. Nope, you just had to be in the know. So I think that would be really cool if you pull it off.
I would love that.
For it to go underground.
Yeah.
And I think the way to do that is you actually do what you're doing, like use social media for now to just make people aware that it exists, and then eventually turn it off, because you will have built such a good base and a good following that they're just ready, and you can find out what works for them. Like, how do you want to know, or how can we communicate with you that this is happening? Because maybe it's a text message.
Right. and that's exactly what it is kind of and I think doing it that way too is the people that need to know will be there, you know. The people that will benefit the most from that space will find themselves there. And so that's definitely the goal. Another thing about Pussy Pop that, you know, I'm not a DJ yet, at least, but I always, my collaborators and the folks, my co-founders are all DJs.
Oh, nice.
So it's a platform for young DJs to, you know, have a really cute party for them to DJ for the first time.
Oh, nice.
You know, I think that's another thing. It's in New Orleans, especially, you know, almost all of our parties, it was one of the DJs was DJing for their first time. And so that was something that I loved, was having a platform for young talent to explore and not feel intimidated by
I love it.
And I think in New York, it's very competitive. You know, everything, even getting a space has been more difficult out here.
Yeah.
So I can imagine that, you know, DJing and finding gigs is also trickier. So that's something else we want to really is support young talent, whether it's you're a performer, whether you're a visual artist and you want to have some of your artwork on display, like whatever it is, supporting young artists and making sure that they're getting paid for their work is another part of the platform. And
so that was going to be my next question. So these events, they are paid events, right? And I guess it would vary in price.
Right. So it depends on, you know, if we're doing it at a bar, we'll usually get a percentage from the bar sales, and that's how we'll pay the DJs. If we do a small cover, all of the money from the proceeds from that will go toward paying talent.
Okay.
So, you know, we'll have a photographer in all of the events, because I think the images from the party and having images of Black and brown queers enjoying themselves is really powerful.
Yeah.
You know, a big inspiration for me doing this work is a party in New York called Papi Juice. And it's a group of my really good friends that throw it, and they are very successful. And that was one of the biggest things, was that having images of Black and brown people enjoying themselves, Black and brown queers enjoying themselves, beyond just like what you see in the news and like the victimization and, you know, of the image of a Black and brown body online. Right. You know, it's a form of activism as well. So,
That's awesome. And so this space is strictly just for queer women of color. Can other people, so let's say there's a queer woman of color who is dating someone who is not a woman of color, are they allowed to attend, or is it very strict about who can enter?
You know, this is like the dicey territory of organizing spaces that centers a certain group of people. I would never want to exclude anybody from, you know, any space that I cultivate. I think it's about, making sure that with queer women of color, you know, all queer women of color and trans women feel centered in the space. So if you're a trans woman of color and your partner is a white male, it's totally okay for him to come to this space and support you, you know. I think the language we use is queer and trans women of color and those who love us.
And those who love us, okay.
Yeah. So if you support you know, this identity, then you're absolutely welcome to be there. But it's making sure that we're taking up the most space at the end of the day.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, so the goal is for majority to be women or trans women of color, but those who love us, as you said, it's also a part of it. So you said you founded this and you started in New Orleans. How long ago was that?
At this point, it's been almost 2 years, 2 full years since I threw the first Prissy Pop. I think it was like summer of 2015. So it's very new, and I've spaced out each event quite a bit.
Okay.
So I haven't done that many, and we've done about 7 parties to date. Right. I'd love to get to the point where we're doing them much more frequently. Okay. But I think just finding a flow and finding the right partners to cultivate the space in, and again, finding the spaces in a timely manner is also a big challenge. I think, you know, there are a lot of bars in New York, right. But there aren't that many, believe it or not, that are willing to host an event like this.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
So it's in the grand scheme of things, and
right.
for reasons beyond just the population.
Right.
That's, being centered in the space, but yeah, we're also just unknown here. So we just had our first event, so people are going to read this and like look at our pictures online and be like, oh, okay, we'll give them a shot.
Right.
And so that's the other bit.
So, and so let's lead us to the next question. You know, the business of my art, one of the things we want to do is help other artists, entrepreneurs, organizers, community activists, anyone who's trying to like do their thing, understand that there is always a business side to things. So you can have this amazing idea, but it doesn't mean that you're not going to face challenges. So you mentioned a couple. Sometimes finding the location is a challenge. Yeah. And I would assume also creating that vibe that you want, I would think initially probably was a challenge. Was it? And if so, talk to us a little bit about.
You know, the vibe actually came together really naturally. And I think so much of organizing spaces and bringing people together is about the intention that you set. Yeah. And so I always, before I even put out an event post or ask for talent to DJ or perform at an event, I always try and get really, with my collaborators, really specific on what it is that we want to achieve out of the event. Right. And usually it's as simple as just creating a really loving, healing space, whatever that means for you, Yeah. Another overused word, healing. But, I think the intention, as soon as, if the intention is set and right for you, then the vibe will be right. And that's never failed to date, but then, of course there'll be challenges during the party. Somebody drank too much and got in a fight with so-and-so, and like, it's gotten a little physical. And of course, everyone comes rushing to the organizer, and it's on me to, be accountable to make sure that that's dealt with in the right manner. Or maybe there's a group of folks that aren't really aware of what the space is, that show up and are taking up lots of space and maybe causing a little trouble. And right. So that's something else that I have to address in the space. And so but I also want to drink and have a good time myself because right. I'm working hard. So it's definitely a balancing act.
Yeah.
But so far the vibe hasn't been an issue at all. I think a lot of the challenges come with the accountability that you have as an organizer,
right?
And some some back and forths that will be had on Facebook about, oh well, what does it mean that it's for Black and brown people? Like, does it I've had white folks get really defensive about what that means, and so Yeah, I think people come for you if you're the face of something, and if you're representing something, and they don't like it or they don't agree with it.
Right.
I've had to learn not to take things so personally.
Exactly. Because with any business, you know, from a marketing standpoint, you want to identify your target audience. And so I always tell people, everyone is not your target audience. Your product, your service, your events are not for everyone. And so when you are very clear about who that is, then you should not have to apologize for who that is, because every major company, every company has a target audience. Right. It does not mean that sometimes we don't evolve and, you know, perhaps, you know, if it's a product that, oh, well, we were intending it for this group, but we found out that this group liked it better. Right. That it could evolve that way. So, but you're right, people will come for you. And that is a part of it, is also taking the negative with the positive. But as long as you know that it's serving the purpose, then you just deal with the negative.
Yeah, exactly.
And obviously we don't want people causing trouble. So there's enough space for all of us out here. So no matter where you are or how you identify, there should be safe spaces for everyone to go and enjoy. So your background, you are a community organizer, is that correct?
Right now, that is my 9 to 5.
Okay. So how did you get into that? And then what do you see as the next thing for you?
So when I was in New Orleans, I actually moved to New Orleans to work for a small contemporary art magazine. And I was managing editor for the publication. And I noticed, you know, it's a transplant organization. Mm-hmm. And New Orleans is such a particular place culturally. And I think the Native population needs to be at the center of anything you do.
Yes.
That's my opinion. Yes. And it wasn't for this organization. And so while I was there, I tried to kind of instill a little more of that, you know, community development embedded in the content of the website.
Okay.
And the magazine. And I think when I left, that's the direction I wanted to move in. Mm-hmm. But I knew I needed to come back to my city to do the work, and fully be present for that work. Right. So I was looking for opportunities here in New York and saw something that was hosted by the city, the Department of Cultural Affairs of the city, in this program in Jamaica, Queens. Not the community that I'm from, but applied for the job and got it, and it was really directly in line with the kind of community development focus that I was moving into. And so right now the project is centered around art, and using art and culture as the kind of vehicle for community development and capacity building. Yeah. And so that's what I've been doing for the last year or so.
So is that, when we think about what's next, what you want to continue to do that kind of work, or do you see something different or more evolved for you?
It's hard to answer that question, because I definitely I know that part of my path is to bring people together. I know for certain that that's a part of, you know, what I was brought to this planet to do in this body. And so that's always going to be a part of how I live and what the kind of work I do, whether it's I'm getting paid for it or not. Right. I love throwing themed parties. Like I'm turning 30 next month. So nice. I want to have a birthday party that's all about Donna Summer and 1977. And one of the albums called 4 Seasons of Love, you know, so that's how I'm bringing people together next month for, you know, my personal way. Yeah. But I think if it happens to be that my next paid position or job or role is doing that, then great. If not, you know, I'm open. There are a lot of different skills that I have. So I'm open to kind of exploring other avenues outside of the arts even.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I've done a lot of different, I've worked for a large international institution, I've worked for a small startup, and then I've worked for a city-funded project.
Okay.
So now I'm like, okay, I think I know what the arts are about and
Right.
what that means for me, and maybe it's time for me to kind of move into a different direction, and maybe it's just full-on community development or something else. Or maybe I'll just start my own company or something. I don't really know at this point.
Hey, so we at the business of my arts support starting your own company, and it doesn't. And I do want to clarify this. It does not matter if people are consultants or freelancers or entrepreneur, CEO, founder, or if they work for a company, because every company still needs people to work for them. So, but just really, taking that to the next level. So, like most people, you're transitioning or shifting. And so we're going to shift a little bit, because part of the Soul Shifter series is I'm interviewing people who attended the Soulshifting Retreats in Ecuador last year, and you were one that attended. So let's talk about first of all, how did you get there? You living in New York at the time, or were you living in New Orleans?
I was still living in New York.
Okay, so you're living in New York, and how did you hear about the Soulshifting Retreats, and what called you to the Soulshifting Retreat?
So the Dr. G Love is who brought me there. I actually met her when I was living in New Orleans about 2 years ago, and I started apprenticing with her and seeing her and doing some shamanic healing work with her. And I was going through a really intense time a couple of months before the Soul Shift retreat. And she was like, this is an opportunity for you to do some really intensive healing work. I think you are a great person to be there. I was of course really reluctant and reticent for practical reasons, emotional reasons. I just was resistant. I was like, I don't know. And she literally was like, okay, but think about it, and plant a little seed. And then eventually I felt like it was the right thing to do.
And for those for you who may not know, our first series kicked off with Dr. Gerald Robinson, aka Dr. G Love, who is the visionary space holder for the Soul Shifting Retreat. So that's who we're referring to. So like most people, you were resistant. It's like, hey, there's lots going on. It costs money, blah, blah, blah.
Right. And I took the leap of faith. I also really, really trust Dr. G with all of my heart. So anything that she really is kind of pushing, then I'll listen. I'll listen to her.
Right.
So.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And I think this is what community is about, and this is what networking is about. We build relationships with people, and we trust people. So for those who are out and doing community organizing or development or owning a business, you have to develop a relationship with people, because people will listen to people they trust.
Right.
More so than they will when they see something pop up in a Facebook feed or on Instagram. Yes. So you took the leap of faith, and you're in Ecuador. So talk about that experience. How was it?
I feel like the first few days of the ritual work that we were doing, I was experiencing some really intense dissonance of not being, like, having one foot in the spiritual realm and one foot out.
Yeah.
And that was, I was struggling quite a bit. Really giving myself to the space. Again, because I'm stubborn, because I'm reticent and have a lot of questions and I'm discerning. And so I think by the third or fourth day, you know, G pulled me to the side and she was just like, you really need to get your shit together. And I was like, okay, all right, okay, Mom, like, all right, I'll like get my shit together for you. And that's really when I really gave myself fully. And I think it really, it's a point of reference for me for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
I talk about it probably once a day.
Oh, wow.
And easily, I try and share it with everyone in my life because it's so powerful. And, you know, we dived so deep into generations of trauma and it was all just energetic work, you know, and
you know, it's a lot. It's a lot. I was actually there with you in December, and just like you, very resistant, and resistant for different reasons. But eventually, I always said ancestors got me there, because I really still to this day don't know how I got there, because it's just like things just like, oh, I'm here. But I recalled when I was leaving that I clearly heard my ancestors say, go all in. And when I got there going all in, but I noticed, and I think Dr. G and Zoe also mentioned, that they could feel that there were a lot of people that were holding back. And you made an excellent point, because it is a lot of ritual work, a lot of energy work, a lot of reliving traumas, a lot of releasing. And sometimes we have held so tightly to those things that it's like, oh my gosh, we have to not only bring them back to recall them before we can release them. And that in itself can be nerve-wracking. So I remember that I didn't really know what was going on with you, but I do remember that it was like this birthing moment, because it's like, Rosemary, and I'm like, wow, she looks different. Something happened.
I remember that. And I remember looking in the mirror and seeing that I looked different, and feeling that I was transformed.
Yeah.
And I think I remember leaving, I took the bus back to Guayaquil from Puerto Lopez, and there was this little girl sitting next to me, and she couldn't stop staring at me.
Oh, wow.
And when I landed in New York on the subway, on my subway ride back from the airport, there were 3 children in the train with me, and they couldn't stop staring at me.
Wow.
They were all just captivated by really the light I was bringing.
Yeah.
It was just,
yeah.
They were all just, what is that? And it was really cool. I felt like a goddess.
Yeah.
Never have. And that rapidly faded within about 12 hours.
Welcome back to the US, right?
And just being reminded of the trauma that my lived trauma that I have to deal with. It was like literally like a slap in the face that I came back to. And it was, I couldn't deny it anymore. Right. You know, I had something happen to me when I was in my early 20s, and it's been almost a decade of pushing it to the side and protecting it. And now it's time for me to kind of unpack it, and I've been doing that work since, and it hasn't been easy, but I already feel like I've done, you know, made a lot of progress since before. It was almost like there's a time, before I went to the summit, the Soul Shift. Right. It was a one period in my life, and then after post Soul Shift, it's a different thing. You know, it's almost like a break, or like more than turning a page. It's like almost closing a book.
Yes. That's an excellent way to describe it.
Yeah.
And that was the point I was going to make, is that a lot of us who attended, and I love that analogy, it was like closing a book, not even a chapter, an entire book. Many of us came back transitioning and going through this transitional period. And part of that, I believe, is really recognizing that we are called here to do something. And if we're not doing it, then spirits, ancestors, guides, universe, guide, whomever you refer to, is not going to allow us to continue to go down a path that is not serving us or our community. So it's no surprise to me that you're kind of feeling like, hey, I'm going through this transition right now. Because I think it just aligns. And I think with your purpose, like, I am here to bring people together. That is what you have to focus on. And everything you do should be focused on bringing people together.
Yeah. So
who would you suggest or recommend to attend the Soul Shifting Retreat?
You know, it's funny because there's just this quality, and it happens to be a lot of the women in my life that have this quality. I know that the Soul Shift is open to, any gender identity, and any race identity, and any identity. But there's this specific, I don't know, this witchiness, or this kind of, it's hard to describe, but there's a quality in some of my close friends and people that I see, even just meet. I'm like, oh, you're a soul shifter, I don't have the words to describe, but it's a feeling you get. And it's almost like this unspoken understanding. Yeah. And maybe it's just as simple as being, doing spiritual work at some capacity. Right. Because it is, I think, for someone that hasn't tapped into any spiritual work, I think it would be really overwhelming, and maybe overwhelming to the point where you might not benefit completely, or as much as you might not optimize the experience if you haven't tapped into that work. At all, and you just go. I agree with you there. A little training, necessary. For me, even, I'm very novice still, and I think that was part of the impediment for me in the beginning was, I'm really resistant because I have all this skepticism, all of this programming that I'm like really holding on to. So yeah, I think that's an important quality for potential soul shifters.
Now, did you see did the retreat help you at all with Pussy Pop? Now, I know you had founded it years prior to ever going to the retreat, but was there something when you came back that you just saw it in a different light?
Absolutely. Like, I think as I came back in January, and I planned the next Pussy Pop within maybe, it was scheduled at the end of the month. It was ready to go. So I came with that energy. And I've been thinking about it. I've been living back in New York since I moved back from New Orleans for about a year. And I've been kind of like mulling over when I was going to do it. And then when I came back from the Soul Shift, I was like, okay, just got to do it. Don't think about it. Don't mull over it anymore. Find a space, find the people, and get them there.
Get them there. And you did it. I love it.
Yeah.
and go ahead.
It is something that is really important to me, which is why I felt it when I came back. Yeah. It's something that's really special to me, even though it's just fun, really.
Yeah. So when Rosemary and I were at the SoulShifting Retreats, she was our translator because they speak Spanish.
Unofficially.
She was my translator. I just attached myself to her. I'm like, wherever you go, I'm going. So tell us a little bit about your background and where you're from and all this wonderful things about you.
So I was born in New York, but my parents are both from the Dominican Republic. and they both came to Washington Heights, which is the kind of an epicenter for Dominicans in New York City,
Nice.
in the late 70s, early 80s. You know, it's funny because all Dominicans most Dominicans are mixed race.
Okay.
And so that's played into like my identity. And there was a period where I didn't know how to identify racially because I wasn't Black enough for Black folks. And I wasn't, you know, definitely not white enough for white folks, and wasn't Latina enough for Latinos. So like,
Wow.
it was definitely this like kind of like a weird,
Right.
liminal space to exist in. But I think being Dominican and looking the way I do in my travels has been really interesting. You know, I lived in China for a year.
Nice.
As a part of my graduate degree. And people didn't know what to make of my appearance. You know, I would get asked how much my hair was, how much my hair was, you know.
Are you serious?
Yeah. So, and then, you know, when I moved to Chicago, to go to university, I'd never been to the Midwest. I was 18, and that's the first time that people really looked at me and were like, oh, she's Black, you know, Black American, mixed, whatever it is. And so I was like, oh, okay, cool. Like I don't really understand where I'm, you know, where I fit in.
Right.
So it's definitely been really interesting. I think the Dominican Republic it's a really hard place to feel really proud of, especially with what's happening and what's been happening there with Haiti, and just the genocide, essentially.
Right.
That's, you know, going full force still and isn't being covered by the media and isn't being acknowledged by a lot of people in my family. And so it's definitely kind of a tormented place for me to really kind of connect with. But yeah, I love Spanish. I love, even though it's another colonial language, there is something about speaking it where I feel, that's why in Ecuador it was such a pleasure to because I feel like I have a different personality in Spanish. You know, I feel a little sexier and I feel more free to just be a little more coquettish than I would be in English.
Yeah.
And so, being in a Spanish-speaking country was really another element to the soul shift experience for me.
Yeah, because I came back going, I really need to learn Spanish. Seriously. Get the Rosemary Stone. I need to learn Spanish. What do you think we need to do? And I say we as in society, to kind of make spaces comfortable for people who don't fit in one bucket, because you're not the first person that I've heard that say, hey, I didn't feel Black enough, I didn't feel white enough, I didn't feel Latino enough. And so what do we need to do to make people feel comfortable and that, you know, in any skin that they're in and how they identify, because it is something that a lot of people are challenged with.
You know, and it's a hard question, and it's such a big question, because I've reached recently a point where I'm just so tired of identity politics.
Yeah.
And there, you know, I was reading recently the Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. She's said something that was really controversial in the trans community. She said trans women are trans women, and she didn't say trans women are women. And, you know, she responded in this really interesting way, because she said that the progressive movements in the United States, and just I think in generally, radicalize everything so much to the point where it's quite isolating. And that's something that I've been kind of navigating in just what I want to think about and talk about and prioritize.
Right.
And unfortunately, we're just not there, which is why it's important to call out a lot of these discrepancies and like the nuances that you miss. But it's like, where is it appropriate to just let it go? And then, you know, I mean, it's never appropriate to let it go, really, but how do you find the balance of like not obsessing over the identity to the point where we can actually have other conversations, that are that could be really transformative and interesting, So, I mean, but I'm on board. I am, and I'm obviously organizing around identity politics, but I'm also, I do feel a bit of like, okay, I'd love for us to move on. Yeah. But I don't know that we're there yet. And I don't know that we'll be there in my lifetime. Right. But I think just like accepting one another, really, and it just, because I still have this thing where I'm like, oh, this white person did this, and then I'll look at them and be like, they're white, so that's why they did that. That happens to, you know, I essentialize and like really, really make generalizations based off of like somebody's appearance, and it's like, it happens before I can even catch myself. And then I catch myself, and I'm like, oh, like, so. And
you make an excellent point, because I think there's a difference between identifying and people using it like a point of reference, right? I'm from Mississippi, I'm a woman of color, and so there's reasons, you know, we have groups, we communicate, we talk, we can understand each other. There's that in terms of identity. But then there's the identity when we start criticizing and saying, but you're not Black enough. Right. So there's that, you know, where we use identity in the negative, because you're not this, or your hair is not straight, or your hair is not curly. Like, I get criticized because even though I don't have a perm in my hairs, I tend to straighten it versus thin. So I'm called certain things. Right. But my skin keeps me Black enough. So other than that, I would not be. So I think if we can get beyond those nuances that says that you have to be a certain way or look a certain way, and it will be really cool if we start identifying as spirits, like, oh, there's the spirit of love, or that's so-and-so, the spirit of help, or there's, you know, and we started talking in those terms, then we'll get to know people before we start identifying other things like this outer physical body and its limitations, so to speak.
And I think to maybe an answer to your question, not the answer, it starts with language too, and how we address one another. And that's something that, you know, despite the frustrations of a lot of folks with the identity politics movement right now, I think it's, you know, like instead of Latino, Latinx, and reusing and reshaping the kind of words we use to describe one another alone is a huge first step in getting to where we want to get in terms of having conversations beyond, you know, okay, what are you? You know?
Right. Well, you're an amazing person. That's what I know. Who I always enjoy talking to, and hate for this interview to even come to an end. So let's just, before we wrap up, just a little bit personal. What's your favorite food?
This is so, I almost feel like embarrassed to say this, but I'm a New York kid. I love pizza. I will eat pizza until the day I die. I literally, if I have 15 minutes to spare and I'm on a corner and I'm kind of hungry and there's a big red and white sign that says pizza, I'm like conditioned to start salivating like a dog. I'm just like, so, no question, pizza.
Yeah, because I was going to ask you, like, if you had a favorite pizza place in New York, but it seemed like it doesn't even matter, right?
It really doesn't matter. There are a few that I won't fuck with, but there are very few.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, is it just New York pizza or is it just pizza across the board? So did you find good pizza in New Orleans?
It was a little hard. Pizza
Okay.
Delicious in New Orleans, because I think they were actually New Yorkers. So
Okay. So shout out
Chicago,
to Pizza Delicious.
yeah, really good pizza there. And Chicago, the pizza was like you have to sit down and eat it with a fork, and then
Yeah.
that I also enjoy, but
Yeah.
it's still, the floppy New York style slice. And then when I did study abroad in Rome when I was 19. So that pizza also ate a lot of, it was delicious. So, but I think the New York slice is still my favorite.
Yeah. And anything else? So, you're from New York, live in New York, born, raised in New York. What other New York thing do you do? So pizza, do you love the cheesecake? Do you like riding the subway? Like, what's the other? And I know I'm being stereotypical, right?
No, I don't like riding the subway actually at all. I actually, there are a lot of things about New York that really drive me crazy and not great for my mental health. But I'm definitely really judgmental, which is is definitely a New Yorker thing, or I'm going to blame it on being from New York. It's another embarrassing quality to share, but definitely judgmental. Love looking very chic in an all black outfit on a rainy day, and I'm pretty aggressive internally. I hold a lot of internal aggression. I feel like I always make this joke where like New Yorkers always have this like circulating aggression. You're just like, because there are so many, you have to make so many decisions at one given time. Am I going to take the F train? Am I going to take the G? Or am I going to take a cab? Am I going to, walk 30 minutes? Whatever. There are a lot of challenges in the span of your day.
Right.
So I think instead of cultivating patience, the city forces you to just like hold a lot of tension. And that's something that New Orleans really taught me, is really patience.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the Big Easy, we do not, I'm sure you may have gotten frustrated because we do not move, like we're like on our own speed here. It's like there's New York fast and then there's New Orleans. It's like, oh yeah, we'll get there.
Wow.
We were talking the other day about going to a party. If a party starts at 7, you should put an end time if you really want people to get there, at a decent time. If not, 10 o'clock, 11.
I love it. I mean, I loved it because, when I first got there, I was still in New York mode and I was like, okay, on my days off, I'm going to get a haircut. I'm going to go buy a new table. I'm going to do all of this stuff. I had a whole list and literally only got to the haircut because you run into so-and-so at CVS and you end up having lunch with them and then you go get your haircut, but your homegirl is running 2 hours late and so you gotta go get like, a meal in between to kill time.
Oh God, yes. I was literally at a Soulshifter's house yesterday, went to drop off something, went to Whole Foods and was going to drop off something to her. 10 minutes and I'm out. That was around 3 o'clock and I did not leave until 11 o'clock that night. Because we stayed, we talked, we laughed, we had wine and we had dinner and before you know it, it was 11 o'clock. And I'm like, this is New Orleans.
Beautiful. I love that.
It's a beautiful thing. Well, it has been my pleasure to have this interview with Rosemary Reyes, the founder of Pootsie Pop. It's a pop-up event for queer, trans women of color. Look for her, the next events, you just don't know. You'll know 2 weeks out, but go to her Facebook page, Pussay Pop, right? So look for her on Facebook before it goes underground. And if you're interested in connecting with Rosemary, check out her Facebook page. You can send her a DM. I'm Stephanie Burns with The Business of My Art. We are part of the Soul Shifter series. So thank you, Rosemary.
Thank you so much for having me, Stephanie. It's been so fun.
Same here. Peace, everyone.